You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Just last November, Cincinnati voters passed by a very narrow margin, 547 votes, a sweeping reform of the way that future council elections will be funded. Now, a group of people opposed to those changes are trying to gather enough signatures to ask city voters this November to repeal a key element of the new system before it is implemented in the 2003 council races. The reforms that were adopted last year were multifaceted, impacting both the contribution and spending sides of the campaigns. Here's a quick summary. On the contribution side, individuals will be limited to $1,000, political action committees to $2,500, and political parties to $10,000. In the case of the mayor's race, two funding cycles with these limits exist. One before the September primary, remember that last time for the first time? One after the September primary. On the spending side, candidates for council and mayor will be given the voluntary option to limit their spending to 3 times the salary of the office. For council, which was paid last November, and let's use these figures, $55,700 a year, that would mean top limit of $167,000 for their campaign. For the mayor, who will make about $111,400, the maximum would be $334,206,000. Lots of numbers. A key element of the new system is that every candidate who accepts the spending limits, which are voluntary, will receive partial public funding from the city's general fund. The matching formula calls for a 2-to-1 match. For a council race, that would mean if a person raised $55,700 on their own, the city would kick in twice as much, $111,400, to get the candidate to a total of $167,000 limit. Finally, the amendment establishes a new elections commission to police the limits for those who accept public funding. Those currently circulating petitions for the charter amendment on this fall's ballot seek to repeal only the public funding provisions of what was passed last November. And that proposal reads in part, no tax monies may be dispersed to any campaign committee or any candidate for any public office, political action committee, or political party. So the end of public funding part of this total proposal. To discuss the efforts to roll back the public funding of city council and mayoral races, I am joined by John Kruse, a former candidate for city council and one of the leaders of the repeal effort, and Greg Harris, who is the director for Citizens for Civic Renewal, one of the 18 organizations in the Fair Elections Coalition that is defending the reforms adopted last November and pushed those reforms through last November. John, Greg, welcome to Newsmakers. Let's start out, John, with you, because this is now the law. This was accepted last year by the voters. Why would you and those who are supporting your position want to repeal this before it's even put into effect, before we even have a chance to test it?
Well, the answer to that question, there are a lot of answers to that question, but the answer why we do it now versus waiting maybe an election cycle, the city faces a $27 million budget deficit next year. So the question is, where do we spend our money? We will have to cut, we'll be the recipients, the city residents, of some form of reduced city services, whether it be police protection or fire protection or trash collection or anything else.
But it's not, am I right, you don't oppose this just because the city currently faces a budget deficit. You would oppose this also even if we were in surplus.
That's correct, absolutely. But keep in mind, this $1.5 million that you talked about costing the taxpayers in an off-mayoral year election, we could fund 28 police officers with that money. The issue is we don't want tax dollars being given to someone that we don't agree with. In 1977, a member of the Ku Klux Klan ran for council. We don't want to give that person any tax dollars to broadcast their hate messages.
Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay. Greg, this was passed. One of the charges is that the voters last year did not understand the public funding part of this proposal, that they heard a lot about limits on giving and limits on spending, but not necessarily on the public funding. They didn't clearly understand that. What do you think about that vote last year? Did people know what they were doing?
I'm wary of an argument that says voter ignorance is why this got passed. I think that's real patronizing. The fact of the matter was this movement came out of a 2-year grassroots strategy, a 2-year public education strategy, a vast coalition. There was a lot of community networking that went behind this. We gathered 11,000 signatures to get this on the ballot.
Do you think that if the public funding part of this, which is what's being proposed right now, was just put to the voters on by itself, isolating that, because that's the charge, that they didn't understand the public funding part, do you think that will pass?
Yeah, public funding is pennies to the dollar when you weigh it against the old system. I mean, under the old system, we had one member of the corporate community who gave $18,000 to $25,000 to 7 of the 9 members of the last city council.
Spread out that
Spread out that money. For some of them, that was 1/4 to 1/2 of their overall campaign budgets. Now, it's no wonder that one person happens to be the owner of the Cincinnati Reds, and it's
Carl Linder.
Carl Linder, and it's no wonder that we heavily subsidize sports stadiums in this community. So the cost of the old system, the backroom deals, the corruption, the fraud, it far outweighs the 1/10 to 1% of the budget that would go to public finance.
John, what about that?
Yeah, let's get to the issue at hand here. We're not talking about contribution limits. That was passed, so we have contributions in place.
And by the way, do you accept those, or will
Yes.
you challenge those
No,
down the road?
I'm fine with those.
There are some people who
Right.
don't like those.
Oh, I agree. But
John Cranley.
Well, we need campaign finance reform. There's no doubt about that. And this thing passed last fall under the auspice of a campaign finance reform package. The issue is this. Raising money is difficult. It's very, very hard work. I'll use my campaign as an example. I moved to Cincinnati in '91. I ran for council in '93. I raised very little money. It's hard. It's very hard to do. It takes a lot of effort. You have to have good ideas, number one. That makes sense. We don't want to give people money. People can't raise money if they don't have good ideas. So that's the fundamental issue there.
How much money did you raise?
I raised probably $10,000.
$10,000 at a time when the top, if this is '93, was raising
$200,000.
$200,000. What about the second time you ran?
I raised over $200,000.
Aha.
And it was because I worked very, very hard.
And you also got full support by the Republican Party.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But the point is this. I wouldn't have gotten that if I wouldn't have worked very hard. We need to focus on this. We can't create this situation that exists in this issue or other issues where we give people money for nothing. We have to encourage people to work hard. We want people involved in politics that work hard, that are smart and intelligent, will make good decisions. And we're talking about giving people money that didn't go out and work hard to raise it.
Greg, what about that? Is this a welfare system for politicians?
Well, are subsidizing the police and the firemen a welfare system for public safety? I mean,
what does that mean?
This is restoring the integrity. This is democracy is a public institution.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be privately subsidized by elite interests. Working very hard. Under this current system, with the reforms in place, only 11 of the 23 council candidates would have been eligible for the public match last time around. You have to receive, for a council candidate, you have to receive $5,000 from 150 different contributors. The mayoral candidates have to receive $10,000 from over 300 different contributors. So you really have to establish a base of support before you're eligible for the public match.
So you have to work hard. In other words, in order to get any public money, you would have to work hard to even get to the threshold that you would earn it.
Yeah, and let me say something else. This equation of good ideas to raising a lot of money, that doesn't fit in when you're talking about public service. The best public servants, the best lawmakers are not necessarily the best fundraisers. They may be the best salespeople. But good salespeople will often say what everybody wants to hear, but that doesn't equate to good leadership.
Let me bring up another point. Let's go. That argument didn't work apparently with Greg. The other side of the issue is this: tax dollars. Would we rather give our tax dollars to a politician or to fund city services? And furthermore, the tax dollars we give under this measure to fund political campaigns, do we want that candidate to be paying their relative to run their campaign, to buying a campaign car, to renting office space from a relative? Things that they can do.
But that's already the case.
Well, right, but we're not using tax dollars to do that today. We're using money that the candidate has raised on their own. I don't want to use my tax dollars that are so, I work very hard for my money, as does everyone, and I want my tax dollars being going towards funding
One of the
city
problems
services.
with Cincinnati City Council is the incumbents almost always win. And consequently, people complain about council, but nothing ever changes. What about the argument that this would allow people with fresh ideas who maybe don't have the access to the funding to come in and break up that control of incumbency?
I don't think there's any validity to that. I think the issue is hard work. If anyone were, look at the history of the campaigns. David Pepper wasn't an incumbent. There are many people that
I've
weren't.
seen people work hard and not get anywhere. I've seen.
I did it. I worked my tail off and didn't get anywhere.
Yeah, or
But
Jane
that's-
Anderson on the Democratic side, or
But
whatever.
that's life. That is the way things work. You have to work hard, and some people are luckier than other people.
But isn't working hard doesn't necessarily get you money either? I mean, you were making that equation. People who work hard.
It doesn't necessarily get you anything.
Right.
But it might. If you want something badly enough, if you work hard enough, then hopefully you'll get it.
The problem is we have a lot of politicians who work hard to earn the favor of moneyed interest. I mean, let's break this down. Look at the people who funded the opposition to campaign finance reform, the people who are opposed to issue 6. It was Procter & Gamble, it was Fifth Third Bank, it was Convergys, it was Frisch's Big Boy, it was U.S. Bancorp, and it was the Republican Party. The bulk of, we were outspent, the issue 6 proponents were outspent 7-1. And all the money came from corporations, PACs, and the Republican Party. The good majority of their anti-campaign finance reform efforts were funded by those sources.
Are those same groups funding this repeal campaign?
I'm sure they will.
They're helping, yes, but we don't have much time.
You have to ask the question, why are these, particularly the corporate community, why does it have such a vested interest in repealing campaign finance reform and public financing? And I think it's very simple. I could go out and ask any man on the street that question, and they would say that it's because they feel like they get a great return on their investment in City Hall. They feel like they own the system and they want to keep it that way.
No.
They're very threatened by issue
John?
6.
Why are we always going after corporations? I work for a corporation. A corporation allows me to pay city taxes. Many of us work for corporations.
But what about Greg's point specifically?
Well,
does that give?
I don't know if I can stereotype a particular candidate that would be geared toward, or a politician that has their interests geared towards corporate interests. But look at the makeup of our city council. I would say that doesn't exist on our city council, so it's just an argument that doesn't exist. One reason corporations help is because they have a vested interest in what's right for the community. And one reason they're helping us get this thing on the ballot is we don't have much time.
Mike Brown had a vested interest in what's right for the community.
What are you talking
They've
about?
donated quite a lot of, they influence the process. They invest heavily in city government, they invest heavily in county government.
I hope they do. They should. They have a stake in the city.
Okay, the
It's
argument's
not in the public interest.
The argument's going to go on,
Oftentimes.
but where are we on this petition? City Council refused to put this on the ballot last week.
We have people collecting signatures every day, and what we're seeing.
How many signatures do you need?
We need 9,300 valid registered voter signatures, and we have right now, I think, about 6,000 raw signatures. So usually half of those signatures turn out to be valid. What we're seeing.
And you have until?
We have until I think September the 3rd to get the full 9,300. So we're making progress. I believe we'll get there, and I believe this measure will pass by a 70% margin.
I'm almost out of time, but Greg, will you challenge carefully the signatures, the validity of the signatures on their list, just as they were ready to challenge this earlier, when a couple years ago when this was on?
I don't know. I mean, I'm in spirit, I'm in favor of ballot initiatives and citizens advancing their interests on the public ballot. But when we're talking about 70% margins, I want to talk about another 70% margin. That's the 70% plus people who sit out election after election. They feel like their vote doesn't count. They feel that the services of public servants have been auctioned off to the highest bidder.
Okay, that's the argument. We're going to continue it, and if this gets on the ballot, you'll definitely be back this fall.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Cincinnati City Council killed the DARE drug prevention program on Wednesday. After the break, a discussion about why and where drug education in schools goes from here.
I think what I got most out of the DARE program was when they went through and told you how to say no. Because a lot of kids, they might not know how.
Welcome back. Nobody would dispute the importance of educating children about the dangers of alcohol and drugs. But this past week, Cincinnati City Council, citing national studies questioning the effectiveness of the DARE program, withdrew its funding for the high-profile program. 12 News reporter Dennison Keller talked with a mother and her teenage daughters about what they think about the DARE program.
Books are rainbows. For which one? The one back there behind my
Teacher
desk.
Terry Duell was spending the day with her twin daughters getting her classroom ready for the upcoming school year. A classroom she thought would once again host DARE education for her students.
Somebody has to tell them, no, drugs aren't right, drugs can hurt you, drugs can kill you, and I would be sad to see the DARE program go.
DARE stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. The multi-week program places uniformed police officers in the classroom teaching children the dangers of drug and alcohol use. Terry says she sees firsthand the positive effect the program has on her students, and yet she also sees the controversy DARE generates in her own daughters.
Oh, how fun.
Both are 19 and went through DARE together. Erin has taken a vow not to drink until she turns 21, and she says DARE played a role in that pledge.
Just to know what drugs and alcohol do to your body and your mind and stuff, it helped a lot for me to stay off of it.
Megan did not make that same pledge to avoid alcohol. She feels DARE is worthwhile, but delivers a minimal impact long term.
It helped to beat into my head that drugs are bad, but overall I think it was my own decision-making process that made me decide my path, which way to go.
I am now joined by City Council member Jim Tarbell, who led the effort to defund the local DARE program. And to discuss the post-DARE future of drug education in the Cincinnati Public Schools, I am joined by Elissa Pogue, who has worked as a prevention specialist with the schools for the past 12 years. Jim, welcome back. Elissa, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Jim, is this a situation where you were saying that the studies that have been done out there say DARE is ineffective and therefore let's not continue to invest in it? Or were you saying, well, whatever effect it's having compared to what our needs, our other needs in the city budget, we just have to give this up? What were you saying?
Well, I would emphasize the latter. I mean, if you had all the money in the world, you know, I guess you might want to continue to do this. I don't know that the compelling, the evidence, the studies have been done, there have been so many of them done in so many places that show it not to be that effective. I don't know that you could make a case for funding it even if you did have all the money in the world, if you want to continue to fund things that are not proven to be effective. But I think it's been allowed to continue because we've had funds, or we thought we had the funds, and the questioning was not as severe.
Let's be clear about inside the city of Cincinnati. How much city money went into this? How much federal money went into this? Because this originally there was some significant federal funding for this back when it began. But what was the proportion at this stage?
Well, yeah, it was mostly federal. I think when it first started. Now it's 2/3 city, and that's this day and age when you have street strength issues, routine patrol officers that you need so desperately. Crime rates has increased dramatically. That's when it really came into question much more critically.
Elissa, have there been any local studies about the impact of DARE?
I know that there was a study through the University of Kentucky, but I only know that from reading that in the Post.
So no study about the city of Cincinnati directly?
Not that I know.
So we're going on anecdotal. We're going on other studies from other places and sort of, but you've been in the schools. What's your observation about the relative effectiveness? DARE is not the only drug education program, and we'll talk about that as we go along here, but what's your observation about the relative effectiveness of DARE in the Cincinnati Public Schools?
It's hard to say. It really is, and I think it varies from school to school, which is why I think it makes sense to evaluate the effectiveness of the program. Cincinnati Public Schools have different populations in different neighborhoods, different kinds of schools, and I think it is valuable to have officers in a positive role in some communities I wonder if it's necessary in other communities. So it's a mixed bag.
So let me just ask, is there any possibility that the loss of city money could be replaced by private fundraising to keep this program going? Do you know what the school's intentions are at this point on that area? Or is it just the city money's gone, therefore we won't be able to afford to do it?
Relative to DARE, Cincinnati Public Schools will probably let council's decision
Make that decision.
lie.
Jim, Elissa brings up an interesting point. Besides the drug education component of this, there was also an important component, at least many people saw it as important, that it put children in personal, positive relationships with real police officers, not just the theoretical police out there, but real police officers. And goodness knows we need that right now in this city. What about the loss of that?
I think that's important, but there are other ways of dealing with it, I think. I grew up in Hyde Park as a kid. I had Orly Wellen next door who ran the paddy wagon. I had Gene Ritter across the street who was a firefighter. Joe Mater down the street who was a firefighter. The chief wasn't too far away. So you interacted with those uniforms.
That was at a time when police and fire had to live inside city limits.
Yeah, and that's what needs to be addressed. You know, we need to address residency. We need to address any measure that can bring the police in closer contact with kids, with the citizenry, but kids in particular, on a healthy basis. So one doesn't see one as just strictly the enforcer or the enforcee. And I think that we are way short of that. This isn't the answer.
Elissa, what about other drug education programs in the schools? This isn't the only thing that schools are doing in this area. What's the full picture look like, and what will go on, even though DARE won't go on?
Well, what's been going on is at least 12, 13 years of safe and drug-free school practices, which are funded by the Safe and Drug-Free School Act. It's through the federal government Department of Education.
So this is federal dollars?
Federal dollars funneled through the State Department of Education and given to every school district in the country gets safe and drug-free school money.
Any sense of how much comes to Cincinnati Public Schools? What that budget is?
About $500,000.
About $500,000, okay.
And what we do and have done is allocate a certain amount to every school based on their 5th through 9th grade population. And based on what the school needs to do, they create programs specific to the problems that they see or they've identified in their buildings.
So does this get at that point that you were making before, that different schools with different populations need different kinds of programs?
Right.
So so what are the variety? How could that money be used in one school versus another school? Just give me some samples.
Okay, and it's some of those, the reason we do this in the schools is so we can measure the effectiveness of the programs. And so, for instance, in one school, if there's drug use or drug possession, drug use in the junior high, 7th through 9th grade, and they bring in a motivational speaker, well-known person, one-time deal, they bring all the junior high kids together, they bring the whole school if it's a junior high. Everyone goes, it's you spend a lot of money, you spend your whole packet right on that speaker. I don't think that one speaker in one session is going to make a whole lot of difference, but there's people out there who say, we can do this for you. We can change, your kids' thinking. As opposed to another school might implement a life skills program, 18 weeks, social skills, values clarification, decision making, some drug and alcohol information.
And would those be taught by health teachers? Would those be taught by whatever classroom teacher the child has?
A lot of those kind of programs have been taught by people like me, licensed independent social workers, chemical dependency counselors in the schools. And what we are working for is for the schools to be able to implement those programs themselves, to allocate teachers to do those programs.
I'm almost out of time, but Jim, one last question. Before you made this move, had you talked to the people in Cincinnati Public Schools?
Not with Ms. Pogue, but with others, and with police officers, and with parents, a variety of people. For a better part of 3 years, this has been likely to happen.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll look at this fall and see how it gets implemented. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.